Hey guys, tonight we step back in time. Not to castles or knights or exciting sword fights, but to something far colder, quieter, and honestly, a lot less glamorous. Imagine waking up on a winter morning in a tiny wooden hut somewhere in 14th century Europe. No central heating, no Wi-Fi, and certainly no cozy socks. Your breath fogs in the air before your face. The cold has its own presence, pressing into your bones like a very rude ghost. This was winter in the Middle Ages, and you probably wouldn't survive it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the global sleepy gang check in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink a few times, still tucked beneath a threadbare woolen blanket that smells vaguely of wet sheep and cabbage. Your breath rises like smoke in the icy air. The sun isn't up, of course it isn't. It barely rises at all during this time of year. You don't check a clock because, well, that hasn't been invented yet. You just listen for the sounds. Outside, a rooster that doesn't know what time it is either, a distant cough from your neighbor's hut, and the wind pushing its way under the wooden slats of your wall. You're already cold. Not chilly, miss. We're talking my toes may have staged a rebellion during the night kind of cold. This is the kind of cold where your water jug is frozen solid, your boots are stiff like medieval popsicles, and even the goat you sleep next to for warmth is shivering and giving you side-eye like this was your idea. Spoiler, it kind of was. In medieval winters, warmth is a luxury. Most huts have one central fire pit, usually in the middle of the room. Chimneys are rare. The smoke just drifts out through a hole in the roof, or doesn't. So now you're freezing and coughing. Congratulations, you're living the dream. You shuffle out of bed, your knees cracking like dry firewood. The floor is packed dirt with a scattering of old straw. At least the bugs have gone into hibernation. Small wins. Your first task is to get the fire going again. It went out sometime in the night because no one wanted to get up and feed it. You can't blame them. You poke at the ashes, hoping to find an ember still hanging on. There's one, maybe two. Barely. You blow gently, trying to coax them back to life. Your fingers are stiff, your breath is visible, and your stomach is already rumbling. But fire comes first. Fire always comes first. The wind whistles through the wallboards, each gust delivering a fresh reminder that insulation won't be invented for another several centuries. You wrap a woolen shawl around your shoulders. It's itchy, but it's better than freezing. That's kind of the motto of your life. It's itchy, but I'm not dead. As the fire slowly returns to life, the room fills with the smell of smoke and damp wood. You don't even notice anymore. Honestly, it's comforting. Your house, if you can call it that, is one room shared by your whole family, a couple of goats, and some chickens that definitely don't understand personal space. The walls are made of wattle and daub, basically sticks and mud. Effective, kind of cozy, not even a little. You glance over at the small window. It's covered in animal bladder, stretched thin like medieval cling wrap. Glass is for churches and nobles. Your window lets in light, sort of, and also lets in cold, definitely. Outside, snow drifts against the door. You'll have to shovel it later, which means grabbing a plank of wood and pushing snow like your life depends on it. Because, well, it kind of does. Historians still debate whether these winters were actually colder due to the so-called Little Ice Age, a period of global cooling that began sometime in the 14th century. Some argue it was exaggerated in later records. Others point to frozen rivers, failed crops, and yes, mountains of snow as proof that people were indeed icicles with emotions. You grab your boots. They're made of stiff leather, slightly cracked, and stuffed with straw for warmth. You wiggle your feet in, trying not to cry. These things feel like they were made by someone who hated feet. Outside, the world is hushed, blanketed in white. It's beautiful in that serene, slowly freezing to death kind of way. The trees are coated in frost. Your breath curls in the air like smoke. There's no traffic, no electricity humming in the background, just wind, distant barking, and the occasional sound of something falling off a roof. You head to the woodpile. It's more of a sad little stack of damp sticks. The good wood was used up weeks ago. This stuff barely burns unless you beg it. You start hauling it inside, each trip, numbing your fingers further. You tell yourself it's invigorating. That's the medieval version of toxic positivity. Back indoors, you feed the fire like a petulant dragon and huddle near it, palms out. The goat inches closer, trying to steal your spot. You let him. He's warmer than you anyway. The morning. Routine is almost done. You're not warm, but you're not dead. Which in the Middle Ages counts as a win, and you haven't even had breakfast yet, but that disappointment is a story for the next section. Your stomach growls, loudly. It's the kind of growl that would make a dog turn its head and stare. You glance at the pot by the fire, a sad, soot-stained cauldron that hasn't seen anything exciting in months. Inside, oats. Just oats. Again. Not oatmeal, mind you. That would imply something hearty or comforting. This is oat mush, flavored only by disappointment, and if you're lucky, a pinch of salt. You shuffle over, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon so splintery it's probably part of your daily fiber intake. The mush burps out a sad little bubble. You're not excited, but it's hot, and that's enough. You scoop some into a bowl made from carved wood, probably handed down from your grandmother, who once used it to eat the exact same mush. You sit down by the fire, if you can call crouching on a three-legged stool sitting, and take your first bite. It's fine. Kind of like eating wet cardboard, if wet cardboard were a luxury food. This is breakfast, and probably lunch. And if no one finds a turnip or some very bold pigeon wandering into the yard, it might be dinner too. During medieval winters, food scarcity wasn't just a problem. It was a lifestyle. You didn't stock a pantry. You were the pantry. Everything you needed for winter had to be grown, harvested, and stored during the warmer months. If the harvest was bad, congratulations. You're now playing the real-life survival mode version of a farming sim, only without the catchy music. Historians agree that the hunger gap, the period between the last stored food and the first spring crops, was one of the most dangerous times of the year. It could last for weeks or even months. In particularly bad years, people got creative, and not in a good way. You're lucky if you've still got oats. Many families diluted what little grain they had with things like acorns or dried grass, which sounds cool until you remember that acorns contain tannins and taste like regret. You glance over at a small cloth-covered jar. It holds salt, your most valuable possession, aside from maybe your one good sock. Salt preserves food, adds flavor, and makes you feel slightly less like you're chewing warm sadness. You allow yourself a pinch. You're feeling wild today. You spoon the rest of the mush into your mouth slowly, trying to stretch it out. You imagine it's stew, with meat, maybe even spices. You chuckle softly. Spices. Those are for royalty, merchants, and people who've seen an orange. You're not even sure what an orange is. Some kind of mythical sun fruit, probably. Occasionally, your family supplements the mush with whatever's left from the smokehouse, a small piece of dried meat, possibly rabbit. Or possibly rat. Who's to say, really? It's smoked, and that's what matters. As you chew, your sibling walks in holding a small root. You stare at it like it's a treasure chest. It's a parsnip. Tiny. Wrinkled. Glorious. Dinner just got interesting. You recall last week when your neighbor boiled leather shoes into a sort of broth. It didn't work, but he pretended it did. He even offered you a bowl. You declined, politely, and then went home and cried into your oat mush. In monasteries, things weren't much better. Despite what romantic books say, monks weren't feasting on roasted goose every night. Many followed strict fasting schedules, especially in winter, so they also ate mush, sometimes lentils, and occasionally, out of sheer joy, both at once. There's an ongoing academic debate about just how often medieval people actually starved during winter. Some records suggest famine was more common than previously believed. Others argue that communities adapted well, relying on storage techniques, trade, and communal support systems. You finish your bowl and wipe your mouth with your sleeve because napkins are a modern invention and, frankly, you're not about to waste precious cloth. You consider a second helping, but there isn't much left, and you still have to get through the day, and possibly the week. You gently nudge the pot closer to the fire, keeping it warm as if it might magically refill itself. Outside, a rooster crows again. You suspect he's mocking you. You pull your shawl tighter and think about lunch. Maybe someone found a turnip. Maybe the snow will melt enough to check the trap lines. Maybe, just maybe, one of the chickens will do something brave and reckless, like wander too close to the fire. But for now, it's oat mush. Again. With just a hint of... Was that dirt? No matter. You chew anyway, before you even think about stepping. Outside again, you need to get dressed. Not for style, obviously. No one in your village is trying to impress anyone in February. You dress for survival, and for the vague hope that your nose won't freeze off before lunchtime. First layer, a linen shift, rough and stiff, like someone tried to make a t-shirt out of a potato sack. It's not clean, nothing is, but it's not too crusty, which, in medieval terms, is the gold standard. Second layer, a woolen tunic. It smells like goat, but then again, so do you. You pull it over your head, wrestling with the tight neck hole. For a terrifying second, you think you're stuck, but then, pop, you're through. Victory. Next comes the hose. They're wool. Two, and they itch in places you'd rather not discuss. One leg at a time, like a very itchy knight without armor. You tie them off with bits of string because elastic won't exist for about 700 more years. Socks? If you're lucky, yes. If not, it's just more wrappings. Strips of cloth twisted around your feet in a desperate attempt to fake insulation. Someone in the house always steals the good sock, the one without holes in the toes. This morning, it wasn't you. Then, more wool. A second tunic, a hood, a hat. A cloak that used to be a blanket. At this point, you look less like a person and more like a lumpy fabric sculpture. You try to bend your elbows. Barely works. It's fine. You won't be moving much anyway. This is how you become a human onion, layered to the point of absurdity, waddling more than walking, and still somehow shivering. You look like you're dressed for a snowball fight at a Renaissance fair, but no, this is just Tuesday. There's no concept of fashion the way we think of it today. Colors are limited by what plants grow nearby. Your style is determined by how recently your neighbor outgrew their clothes and handed them down to you. If something's too big, you belt it. If it's too small, you just ignore that and hope you don't burst a seam when you sneeze. And remember, laundry is a summer activity. No one's washing anything right now. Why? Because water is frozen, soap is scarce. And honestly, you'd rather be a little smelly than risk hypothermia, just to have clean leggings. That's a trade-off medieval people were perfectly fine with. So are you. Academics still debate whether layering truly kept people warm in the worst parts of winter. Some argue it was marginal at best. Body heat trapped between coarse fibers was better than nothing, but barely. Others point to more creative winter garments found in archaeological digs, like padded hoods or cloaks lined with fur. Though, let's be honest, unless you're nobility, your fur lining probably came from a squirrel that gave up too soon. You throw a heavy woolen mantle over your shoulders. It's mostly dry. That's the best you can say about it. As you wrap it tight, you remember that last winter, your cousin tried to make mittens out of pigskin. It didn't go well, the smell never left. In noble households, clothing might be more elaborate, velvets, furs, silk, but don't be fooled. Those castle walls were cold stone, and no amount of embroidery can stop frostbite. Besides, silk gets clammy fast, which coincidentally is also the name of your punk band now. Silk gets clammy. Back in your hut, your reflection in the water jug, which is, yes, still frozen, shows a slightly puffy, slightly worried face under multiple layers of earth tones. You look ready for battle. A battle against the air. Finally, you loop a scarf, really just another strip of wool around your neck 3 times. You briefly consider pulling it over your entire face and pretending you don't exist until spring. But you have things to do: wood to haul, animals to feed. Someone needs to go check if the chicken coop roof collapsed again. Spoiler, it probably did. So you stomp toward the door in your heavy leather boots. They're patched with so many materials they look like a craft project done by someone blindfolded. Each step feels like you're wearing 2 frozen loaves of bread strapped to your feet. Still, you're ready. Or as ready as anyone can be when dressed, like an angry laundry basket. You pull the hood up, mutter a quick prayer to whoever's listening, and open the door into another day of medieval chill. One step into the snow, and your foot immediately sinks up to the ankle. Cold, wet, and wildly inconvenient. But at least your tunic didn't catch fire on the way out like last year. Small wins. You sneeze loudly. It echoes off the wooden walls like a trumpet announcing doom, and 3 chickens scatter under the bench. The goat looks at you, startled. Your grandmother mutters something about lung spirits and starts fumbling through, a bundle of dried herbs hanging from a beam. In the 1300s, a sneeze isn't just a sneeze. It's a potential omen, a signal that your humors are imbalanced, a warning that maybe you've caught the dreaded winter air corruption, which sounds like a bad fantasy novel, but was a real medieval concern. You sit back on your stool and sniff. It's just a cold, probably, hopefully. But in this world, even a cough can spiral into legend. You're about to learn that the line between medicine and witchcraft is thinner than the ice on your roof. The local healer, who may, or may not also be your aunt, appears in the doorway wrapped in scarves and mystery. She doesn't knock. She never knocks. She just enters holding a bowl of something steaming and vaguely green. She tells you your bile is too cold, or maybe your blood is too damp. It's hard to keep track of the logic, but she seems confident. And confidence is half of medicine at this point. Take this, she says, handing you the bowl. You peer inside. There's definitely a twig. Also what might be onion skin, possibly a beetle. You sip anyway. It's bitter and tastes like despair marinated in moss. But it's warm, and that counts for something. In the medieval worldview, health is all about the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. You don't know what any of them really are, but you've got all of them. And apparently they're always misbehaving. Your symptoms, sneezing, coughing, a sore throat, could mean many things. Could be a chill. Could be lung melancholy. Could be the early stages of something unpronounceable and definitely fatal. There's a solid chance the goat gave it to you. Or maybe the wind. You lie back on your straw mattress. The healer starts burning dried rosemary in a clay bowl. She waves it around your face. The smoke curls upward, filling the room with a scent halfway between forest floor and failed soup. You cough again. That's good, she says. The spirits are leaving. Excellent. Nothing like second-hand exorcism to kickstart your recovery. Historians still debate how effective medieval medicine was. Some argue that local herbal knowledge was surprisingly advanced, especially in rural communities. Others note that many treatments were based more on superstition than science. Either way, if you survived an illness, it was considered proof. The treatment worked. If you didn't, well, your humors were beyond redemption. To be fair, your healer's toolkit isn't all bad. She's got dried elderberries, thyme, mint, and, oddly, powdered oyster shell. She keeps it in a leather pouch tied to her belt, next to a small knife and a half-carved wooden rabbit. Multitasking, she asks if you've been sleeping near open windows. You point to the window, which is really just a flap in the wall covered with an oiled rag. She nods as if that explains everything. Apparently, evil air comes in at night and settles in the lungs, which honestly doesn't sound entirely wrong. There's a knock at the door. It's your neighbor holding his son, who is red-faced and sweating. The healer sighs and mutters something about February being the season of damp lungs. She sets down your beetle broth and heads over. You wrap your cloak tighter and sip the rest of the mixture. It grows on you, sort of like moss, but emotionally. The warmth spreads through your chest, and for a moment you feel less miserable. Then you sneeze again, violently. The goat bleats and bolts. A chicken poops on your foot. You sigh. Typical Tuesday. You overhear the healer telling your neighbor to rub goose fat on the boy's feet and hang garlic from the rafters. These are tried and true remedies, passed down for generations. No one remembers if they work, but they feel comforting, like an old song you don't understand but still hum. You pull the blanket over your shoulders and lie back again. The fire crackles, your sinuses throb, and the smoke makes your eyes water. You're not better, but you're cared for. And in the medieval winter, that's medicine enough. The healer returns and pats your forehead. You'll live, she says with confidence that feels completely unearned. Still, you believe her. Because really, what else are you going to do? Your toes have officially vanished. Not in the, I lost them under the blanket kind of way, but in the, I genuinely don't think they're still attached kind of way. You wiggle them or try to, nothing. just numb silence from your feet, a bad sign. You sit on a wooden bench, hovering them over the fire like two frozen potatoes. The heat is slow to reach through the layers of ragged socks and hope. Every so often you slap your feet, partly to stimulate circulation, partly out of frustration. It doesn't help much. Outside it's snowing again. Not the soft, charming kind. This is the sideways, spiteful kind of snow. The kind that sneaks into every gap in your clothing like it has a personal vendetta against warmth. And against your toes, apparently. Earlier this morning you had to walk to the well, which is a solid 5-minute trudge through knee-deep snow. Easy, right? Except your boots have holes, and your leggings were damp, and the wind was determined to make you suffer. So now you're paying the price, toe tax. In the medieval winter, frostbite isn't just a risk, it's a recurring seasonal guest, like that one relative who shows up uninvited and won't stop complaining. And if you're lucky, it's only your toes. Fingers, ears, and even noses are also on the chopping block, literally and figuratively. You remember hearing about the blacksmith's apprentice, who lost 3 fingers after working without gloves one January. The local healer said his blood had retreated from his extremities, which is a poetic way of saying his hand looked like a cold, sad prune and then turned purple. There are no real treatments for frostbite. The standard procedure involves rubbing snow on the affected area, yes, more snow, or dunking it into icy water. Both of these are bad ideas, but they're the only ones people know. Sometimes someone suggests holding the limb near a fire, but not too close, unless you want to accidentally roast your own foot like some kind of peasant barbecue. You pull your feet back for a second, concerned. Did something just sizzle? No. Hopefully not. Historians still debate just how widespread frostbite-related amputations were. Some evidence from burial remains suggests missing toes and fingers were not uncommon in colder regions. Other scholars believe most people developed a sort of grim resilience. Minor frostbite was tolerated, like a seasonal rash with attitude. And what if the damage is severe? Then it's time for a medieval amputation, a term that should strike fear into the hearts and limbs of everyone. There's no anesthesia, just a saw, a prayer, and maybe a stick to bite down on if someone remembers to bring one. You shudder. Not today, thank you. You glance down again. Your toes are still the color of old cheese, not ideal, but they're not black. Yet you pull on an extra pair of socks you find under the bench. They smell like goat, but honestly, so does everything else. As you warm your feet, your aunt offers you a strange suggestion. Wrap them in goose fat and wool, then tuck them under the dog for warmth. It's not the worst idea. The dog looks offended, but doesn't move when you sidle over. You remember tales from travelers who claimed people in the far north would sleep with heated stones wrapped in cloth at the bottom of their beds. That sounds incredible. You, however, have exactly one rock, and it's outside somewhere under a foot of snow. In wealthier homes like castles and monasteries, frostbite was still a problem. Stone walls hold cold like they're being paid to do it. Even with tapestries and fires in the hearth, servants were known to wear gloves indoors and sleep in groups to share body heat. Coziness by necessity. Your brother, returning from the woods, stomps inside with a red nose and stiff fingers. He tries to flex them, and they make a noise that's alarmingly close to crunching. He looks at you and says, "I think my ear's frozen again." You nod sympathetically. At least it's symmetrical this time. You both laugh. Sort of. You know that strange middle place between humor and despair. Yeah, medieval people invented that. Eventually feeling returns to your feet. It's not pleasant. It feels like someone stabbing your toes with flaming toothpicks. You grit your teeth and mutter a few choice medieval phrases that probably translate to "ouch, my everything." But still, you made it. Your toes are intact. Barely. You give them a wiggle and whisper, "Don't you dare fall off." They don't respond. Rude, you wrap them back up, layered in every available scrap of wool and cloth, and decide not to go outside again unless absolutely necessary. Like the house is on fire level necessary. And even then, you'd consider your options. The fire crackles, the dog shifts closer to your feet, and for a brief moment you feel something that almost resembles warmth. You'll take it. You'll take it. You can see your breath, indoors. It curls from your mouth in little puffs as if your soul is trying to escape one sigh at a time. You sit in the main room, wrapped in every woolen thing you own, still colder than a snowman's handshake. Welcome. Found a home heating, medieval style. The fire crackles weakly in the hearth. It's more smoke than flame, sputtering like it's just as tired of this winter as you are. You poke at it with a stick, more out of hope than technique. One spark jumps, then fizzles. Mood. Here's the thing. Most medieval homes weren't designed to keep heat in, they were designed not to fall down, and sometimes they failed at that too. Your walls are made of wattle and daub, basically twigs smeared with mud and dreams. It insulates about as well as a pasta strainer. The roof is thatch. Cozy in theory, but with enough gaps to let in breezes, birds, and the occasional confused squirrel. Wind whistles through the cracks, carrying with it little snowflakes that float merrily down onto your bed like glitter, but meaner. There's a chimney, kind of. It's more like a hole near the roofline that tries, often unsuccessfully, to usher the smoke outside. Most of the time it just swirls around the room like a confused ghost. Your eyes water constantly. You tell yourself it's just the onions. From dinner. You haven't had onions in a week. Your hands are red from cold, and even the dog, who's basically a walking blanket, has tucked himself under the bench and refuses to move. You're on your own. You shift closer to the fire and remember the stories. Nobles with massive hearths, tapestries on the walls, heated stone floors. Sounds dreamy, except those castles were also freezing. Huge stone corridors held onto cold. Like gossip. People wore hats indoors and huddled around braziers filled with glowing coals. Fancy? Maybe. Warm? Not even slightly. In your house, the fire is the heart. Everything revolves around it. Cooking, eating, storytelling, general survival. But firewood is a limited resource, especially by midwinter. You can't just go chop down trees. The forests are frozen, the axe is dull, and honestly, you're tired. You ration the wood like it's gold. To stretch it, people burn peat, dried, animal dung, and even bundles of straw. You've tried all three. Peat smells earthy. Straw burns fast, and dung, well, it's technically efficient. It also makes your house smell like a warm barn that no one asked for. Your neighbor once tried heating his home with hot stones. He'd roast them in the fire and bury them in the floor under a fur rug. It worked, kind of, until one cracked and sent embers shooting into the straw bedding. That was the night half the village learned how fast thatch can burn. You glance up nervously. Your own thatch roof is holding strong, for now, but it drips occasionally. Melting snow finds its way through the cracks and falls onto your sleeping mat, like nature's alarm clock. It's fine. You weren't sleeping much anyway. Historians still debate the effectiveness of medieval home heating. Some suggest that sleeping in close quarters with animals provided extra warmth and fleas. Others argue that layering and lifestyle adaptations did most of the work. The general consensus: people were cold. All the time, you lie on your side by the fire and pull your cloak tighter. The embers glow like sleepy eyes. You imagine what it would be like to have heated stones under the floor, a real chimney, maybe even gasped glass windows. But you push those dreams away. That's luxury stuff. You've got a damp wool blanket and 2 semi-functional socks. You're basically royalty. The wind howls outside, rattling the shutters. A draft creeps under the door and makes your candle flicker. You grab a bit of cloth and shove it into the gap. Temporary fix. Permanent frustration. Your cousin once tried. Hanging tapestries made from old tunics to keep out the cold. It worked until a mouse decided one was ideal for nesting. You haven't been able to wear blue wool since. Eventually you give up on being warm and settle for being not as cold. Your standards have dropped significantly this winter. Last night you told someone your bed was cozy just because you didn't wake up with frost on your eyebrows. The fire dims. You add one last log, your last log, and watch as it catches slowly, reluctantly, like it's also trying to decide whether survival is worth it. You lean back. The warmth is uneven. One side of your body roasts, while the other continues to flirt with hypothermia. It's not ideal, but it's familiar. This is home. Not warm, but still here. And for tonight, that's enough. You haven't bathed in... You've lost track. Days? Weeks? It's hard to remember because the layers of grime start to feel like armor after a while. In fact, you're fairly certain one of your layers is armor. emotional if not actual. Bathing in winter is a negotiation, a dangerous game of, do I want to be clean or do I want to live? Because getting naked in a room with no heat and a bucket of tepid water is basically asking to join the ghosts. Still, the itch has reached threat-level wool, and your armpits have declared independence. So you compromise. A bucket bath. By the fire. Sort of. More like a wipe-down. A splash here, a cloth there, a hopeful scrub, and then 10 minutes of shivering while you regret every decision that led to this moment. You peel off your layers. Each one makes a sound. Crackling. Creaking, possibly whimpering. You could make a horror movie just from the sound of removing your winter tunic. The water is in a wooden tub, hauled in earlier from the well, and heated just enough to be less freezing. You dip your fingers in. Yep, still awful. You start. With your face, then arms, then the rest, fast, efficient, painful. You can feel your skin protesting, your teeth chatter in rhythm, and by the end, you're not even clean, you're just less sticky. Blankets help, sort of. If by help, you mean they smell faintly of wet dog and have questionable stains from a mysterious stew incident 3 months ago. Still, you wrap yourself in 3 of them, like a sad medieval burrito, and shuffle back toward the fire. Medieval hygiene isn't about being spotless, it's about being passable. No one's expecting you to smell like roses, especially since roses are out of season and perfume is reserved for nobility, or the church, depending on who's richer that week. Instead, you rely on other methods, rubbing herbs on your skin, changing linen underlayers, when possible, and pretending you don't notice the smell coming from your boots. You once heard someone say lavender wards off lice. You tried it. The lice now just smell delightful. Academic historians still debate how often medieval people bathed. Some argue peasants rarely washed during the winter, due to the risk of illness, while others point to bathhouses, even public ones, as evidence of a surprisingly clean culture. But in your house, it's more about risk management than hygiene. Habits. You think of nobles again. Some had large wooden tubs filled by servants and surrounded with candles. They bathed with flower petals and sang songs about virtue. You meanwhile just tried not to get soap in your eyes and cry. Soap, by the way, is homemade. Animal fat, ashes and herbs. Yours is lumpy, smells vaguely of bacon, and works about as well as using a pine cone, but it lathers, kind of. And that's good enough for now. After your bath, you feel a little better. A little. You haven't unlocked enlightenment or anything, but your hands are cleanish, and the layer of soot on your neck is at least less crusty. That's basically spay-level pampering in the 1300s. Your cousin walks in, takes one look at the tub, and says you're brave, then immediately wraps himself tighter in a sheep-hide blanket and starts eating cold turnips like nothing happened. You're too cold to be offended. At night, you crawl into your sleeping area, a bundle of straw under, more blankets than you remember owning. You lie still, trying not to disturb the pocket of body heat you've generated. You pull the wool over your face, not just for warmth, but because the smell of your own breath is somehow cleaner than the ambient aroma in the room. A mix of wood, smoke, damp socks, and mystery stew residue. If only you could bottle it. As you drift off, you think, maybe I'll try again in the spring. A real bath, outside, with sun. It's a nice thought, almost a dream. One you'll revisit every time you scratch that spot behind your ear that hasn't felt fresh since last Michaelmas. But for now, you're wrapped, scrubbed, barely, and horizontal. And honestly, that's peak comfort in medieval winter. You stare into your wooden bowl. Inside there's a lumpy, pale mash that may once have been turnips, or sadness. Hard to say. You poke at it with a spoon carved from what you're pretty sure used to be a ladle. Steam curls upward, offering a faint promise of warmth if not flavor. Dinner is served. Winter meals in the 1300s are less about choice and more about availability. What's in season? Nothing. What's left from the harvest? Not much. What do you have? Turnips, maybe a few parsnips. If you're lucky, a shriveled apple that looks like it's been in a fistfight. You chew slowly. The texture is somewhere between overcooked and underimagined. The taste, earthy, which is to say it tastes like dirt. But at least it's warm, and your stomach, which has been growling like a small wolf all afternoon, doesn't care. Your teeth, however, do care. Dental hygiene in medieval times is theoretical. You may brush your teeth with a twig now and then, or rub them with salt and ashes if you're feeling fancy. But cavities happen, teeth crack, and by your age, you're missing one or two. Your grandmother, famously, has none. She just gums her food into submission with a determination that borders on heroic. You take another bite and try not to think about the chewy bit. Was that a root? A pebble? A beetle? It's better not to ask. Most meals in the winter revolve around pottage, a catch-all stew of whatever you can find. Grains, leftover meat scraps if you have any, dried legumes and root vegetables. It simmers all day over the hearth, gradually becoming one mysterious flavor. You add herbs when you have them, but winter doesn't grow much, except hunger. Historians generally agree that winter malnutrition was common, especially among peasants. Lack of vitamin C led to scurvy, brittle bones, and that charming medieval accessory, chronic fatigue. But hey, at least your cousin's turnip farts keep things lively. Occasionally, a dried sausage appears. It's treated like treasure. Once, you heard someone whisper meat like it was a spell. Meat is rare, especially in winter. Animals are slaughtered in late autumn and the best cuts go to the Lord. You might get the offal if you're lucky, or preserved strips of pork fat, salted into oblivion and harder than a bishop's stare. You dunk a crust of bread into your pottage. The bread is stale. No surprise, it was baked last week and left to double as a building material. You gnaw on it with determination, the way a beaver might approach a fence post. Your little brother, sitting cross-legged by the fire, tries to trade his dinner for a single dried fig. He is unsuccessful. The fig is the property of your aunt, and she guards it like a dragon hoarding raisins. Still, food means community. Meals are eaten together, shared, talked over, even if what you're saying is, "I think my spoon just cracked." Everyone contributes. Someone grew the turnips, someone stored the grain, someone seasoned the stew, someone complained about all of it. You remember the dried beans hanging in the rafters. They're your emergency stash, saved for when things get really bad. And by really bad, you mean when turnips start to taste like betrayal. There are rumors, always rumors, about other villages eating more lavishly. They have cheese, someone says one evening, eyes wide with wonder. Cheese, the mythical substance. You vaguely remember its taste. Smooth, salty, comforting, like biting into joy. You glance around the room. A single candle flickers. Bowls are scraped clean. Someone licks a spoon like it's made of honey. It isn't. Still, there's comfort, in ritual. You know what to expect. Boiled things, mashed things, and sometimes, if the stars align, roasted things. Simplicity has its own rhythm. You help clean up, stacking bowls and rinsing them in a basin of grey water near the door. It's icy, everything is. Your fingers sting. The dog licks your leg, then sneezes into your sock. That's fine. You've given up on dignity. As you settle in for the night, belly full, sort of, you're grateful. Not for the turnips, but for the fact that there were turnips. Some nights, there's just broth. Or less. Hunger sharpens your sense of gratitude the way it sharpens your bones. You wrap yourself in blankets, curled up like a cinnamon roll with frostbite, and just before you fall asleep, you think, tomorrow we'll try boiling it longer. Maybe it'll taste like something new. It won't, but you'll eat it anyway. You roll over and immediately regret it. A bit of straw jabs you in the ribs. Something crunches under your shoulder. Maybe an old bean pod. Maybe something alive. You don't investigate. You just sigh and try to find a soft patch on the mattress, which is really just a sack stuffed with hay and dashed expectations. Welcome to your bed. It's not exactly spacious. You share it with your younger brother, your cousin, and occasionally a chicken that refuses to sleep anywhere else. There's no such thing as personal space. You sleep in a medieval cuddle pile, each of you tangled in cloaks, wool, and limbs, trying to trap as much body heat as possible, and you're all still cold. The bed itself rests on a wooden frame if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's just straw on the floor. The stuffing hasn't been changed in months, so it's flat in the middle and smells like feet, goat, and old soup. You don't even question it anymore. You pull the blanket tighter. It's made of rough wool, itchy enough to exfoliate your soul. But it's the only thing between you and the icy air that seeps in through the cracks in the wall like a judgmental spirit. Somewhere in the pile, Someone snores. Loudly. It's like a bear trying to play the flute through its nose. You elbow. Your brother. He snorts, mutters something about not eating the frog, and rolls over, taking half the blanket with him. You sigh again. Maybe sleep will come eventually. Medieval beds weren't built for comfort. They were built for survival. In richer homes, people might have feather mattresses, curtains around the bed to trap heat, and even nightcaps to keep their heads warm. You've got a burlap sack stuffed with itchy straw and exactly one pillow that smells like despair and fleas. You don't want to talk about the fleas, but they're here, you can feel them. Occasionally you scratch your leg and wonder if it's just dry skin or if you're slowly becoming a buffet. Either way, you make a mental note to sprinkle some dried mint and rosemary into the straw tomorrow. It won't do much, but it might convince the fleas to get bored and move to your cousin. Academic debates continue around how common flea infestations were in peasant homes. Some historians suggest straw bedding was regularly changed and treated with herbs. Others argue that most people simply learned to coexist with the scratchy reality. Either way, you've accepted your fate as a living flea resort. The fire has gone out in the main room. The temperature drops. You can see your breath even under the covers. Your toes, already half frozen from the nightly sprint to the chamber pot, have decided to retire from circulation. They've given up. You respect their decision. Sometimes you fantasize about a warm feather bed, one with soft linen sheets, maybe a hot stone at your feet, wrapped in cloth and still radiating the fire's heat. But then your cousin kicks you in the shin and mutters something about a haunted carrot, and you remember where you are. There's also the occasional bed-sharing etiquette to navigate. Don't breathe directly on someone. No hogging the blanket. No sleep-talking about plagues. And above all, no wet feet. Violators will be kicked, quietly, but firmly. You adjust your position again, trying not to wake the dog who's managed to wedge himself under your knees. He smells like the outside and something unspeakable he rolled in earlier, but he's warm, so you let him stay. Someone coughs in the darkness, a dry rattling sound. You make a mental note. If they start turning blue tomorrow, you're moving to the loft. You've survived one winter cough epidemic. You're not about to catch another, just because your cousin sleeps like a chimney. Still, there's a strange comfort to it all. The closeness, the sounds of people breathing and snoring and mumbling, the scratchy wool, the prickle of straw. It's a patchwork of discomfort, yes, but also of familiarity. Your mother once said, "If you're warm enough to complain, you're warm enough." She also once slapped a chicken for stealing her slipper, so take that wisdom as you will. You close your eyes and count breaths. Yours. The dog's. The house groaning in the cold like it's stretching its bones. You scratch your arm absent-mindedly. Flee. Definitely flee, and yet you're home, curled in the middle of a medieval mattress sandwich. Cold, itchy, and slightly smushed, but not alone. Eventually, your breathing evens out. The straw squeaks beneath you as you shift into sleep, one pokey rib at a time. Just another night in the 1300s. There's no Netflix, no podcasts, not even a pamphlet to read. Printing presses won't be around for another 100 years or so, but the fire is lit, the room is dim, and someone starts singing. Entertainment in the medieval winter is what? You make it, literally. You can't scroll your way through boredom, you have to perform your way out of it. Tonight it's your aunt humming a ballad. Her voice is a little cracked, a little tired, but somehow perfect for the mood. She sings of love lost snow deep, and knights who make questionable decisions for dramatic reasons. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The melody is simple, repetitive, almost hypnotic. You don't have a lute, but someone taps a rhythm on the side of a stool. It's offbeat, but no one minds. Music isn't about precision, it's about not going entirely stir-crazy in a one-room house full of turnips and complaints. After the song ends, someone else tells a story. It's a classic, about a man who sells his soul to a wandering spirit for a bowl of stew. Everyone laughs at the ending, which involves the man getting tricked into eternal dishwashing. There's a moral in there somewhere, but no one bothers. To find it? Too much effort. Your cousin starts another tale. This one's about a talking fox who impersonates a priest. It makes less sense the longer it goes on, but that's part of the charm. Medieval humor is a strange mix of religious metaphor, bodily functions, and animals with suspiciously human jobs. You've learned not to question it. What you don't laugh at, you puzzle over. Riddles are popular. Someone asks, "What is a mouth but cannot eat and runs without feet?" You think it's a river. Your brother says, "My uncle." Everyone groans. The answer is a river. The joke is your family. Sometimes you play games, simple ones, dice, bones, or a board scratched, into the table with pebbles for pieces. Cheating is common, so is yelling about cheating. No one remembers the rules exactly, but everyone insists they're right. There's also the occasional moment of performance art. Your grandmother recites proverbs with the gravity of a bishop, but the delivery of someone who's just finished, arguing with a goose. She once said, "The cold doesn't bite if you don't taste it." No one knew what she meant, still doesn't, but we all nodded respectfully. Not all the stories are fun. Some are scary. About the forests, deep, dark, and haunted by things unnamed. About winter spirits who steal your warmth. About people who wander into snowdrifts and are never seen again, except as oddly shaped lumps in spring. You know these aren't bedtime stories in the cozy modern sense. They're warnings, told with enough flair to stick. You listen and shiver, not just from the cold, but from that prickling awareness that the world outside your little wooden home is huge, dark, and unconcerned with your comfort. Still, the bee. Stories bring people together. Everyone leans in, the fire flickers, shadows dance on the walls. You can't remember the last time you were alone with your thoughts. And maybe that's a blessing. Entertainment is communal. You don't perform. For others, you perform with them. Even if you're just clapping offbeat, telling a half-remembered riddle, or nodding along to a tale about a goose that inherited a manor house. Historians have noted the social function of medieval storytelling, how oral tradition preserved not just facts but feelings. Communities passed down legends, family jokes, and even local grievances through tales. Some even argue that storytelling helped regulate the emotional rhythm of long, harsh winters. You can see why. As the night deepens, the stories slow, the voices grow softer, laughter becomes murmurs. Someone yawns dramatically. Another person whispers, "Tell that one about the cow with the iron shoes again." You smile. You've heard that story 100 times. It makes no sense. You love every word. Eventually, your aunt returns to humming. The fire has dimmed to embers. The air smells like wood smoke, wool, and onion stew. Your cousin's head droops onto your shoulder. The fox priest tale is already blending into your dreams. And just before you slip under, you think, who needs a book when you've got the world's most confusing bedtime story whispered by candlelight? At some point in the middle of the night, you wake up with a problem. It's cold, you're warm-ish, burrowed into blankets and hay, wedged between your cousin's elbow and your brother's knee. But your bladder has launched a formal complaint, and unfortunately, medieval plumbing doesn't exist. There is no bathroom, no porcelain, no flush, just you and the outhouse. You sit up slowly, trying not to disturb the canine foot warmer, curled at your feet. He growls faintly, then resumes his dream of chasing spectral squirrels. You grope for your boots, which are always colder than ice and smell like medieval regret. Sliding them on is an act of courage that deserves its own ballad. You wrap your cloak around you like a dramatic widow and shuffle toward the door. Every floorboard creaks like it's announcing your journey to the spirits of the house. The latch on the door is frozen. Of course it is. You mutter a few words your grandmother would disapprove of and give it a good yank. Now you're outside. It's dark, really dark. You forgot how complete the night feels without street lamps. Just stars overhead, a sliver of moon, and your breath, fogging the air in front of your face like ghostly commentary. You trudge toward the outhouse. It's technically a small wooden shed with a seat over a hole, one that freezes solid by midwinter. It doesn't smell right now, but only because your nostrils have gone numb. You swing the door open and hope nothing living is inside. Once, a raccoon stared at you the whole time. You've never emotionally recovered. You do what you must. As fast as possible. The seat is freezing, an actual hazard. You begin questioning all your life choices and swear to never drink broth again. Historically, sanitation in the Middle Ages varied. Wealthier homes might have chamber pots or even rudimentary garderobes, stone chutes that emptied into moats or pits. You've got the loo of doom and a strong will. Some folks use chamber pots, of course, a handy little bowl you keep under the bed and empty each morning. But your family learned the hard way that your cousin can't aim, and the dog once knocked one over. Now it's strictly outhouse or bust. There's also the alternative, the don't go method. Some people just don't. They wait all night, play bladder chicken with nature, but you've tried that. Once, never again. The cost was too high emotionally and physically. You finish up and exit the tiny shed, breathing a sigh of relief that immediately freezes into a frosty mist. You glance up at the stars. They're stunning, to be fair. Bright, sharp, almost too clear. It's the kind of sky that makes you feel small and humble, and also very, very cold. On your way back, your boot catches on a frozen root and you stumble. You don't fall, but your pride takes a hit. You wonder briefly if anyone in history has ever frozen to death halfway between a latrine and a house because they didn't want to pee in a bucket. Probably. Back inside, you try to sneak in without waking the house. You fail. Someone stirs. Your cousin mumbles, "Is it spring yet?" You whisper no and fall back into the hay, trying to find the exact divot where your warmth used to be. It's gone. Of course it is. The heat you built up earlier is now firmly in the past. You curl up like a croissant and try to negotiate with your own body for more warmth. Still, you're lucky. In some homes, people had to trudge across snowy courtyards to use a communal pit. Others simply went in the fields, assuming the snow wasn't too deep. Urban dwellers had the charming habit of tossing the contents of chamber pots out windows, which made walking downwind a hazardous experience. There's a reason laws were eventually passed about when you could dump your night soil. Nothing says good morning like surprise medieval sewage from above. Back in your hay bundle, you settle in, slowly. The blankets eventually remember their duty and trap a bit of warmth again. Your brother murmurs something about carrots and kicks you lightly in the shin. You don't even flinch. Just before sleep returns, you think tomorrow no broth after sunset. Maybe, but probably not. You wake up again, this time to the familiar sensation of cold biting at your exposed skin. You pull your woolen cloak tighter, adjusting the folds around your shoulders like a medieval superhero who's allergic to frostbite. Clothing in these brutal winters is a game of layers, each one rougher than the last, but also absolutely essential if you want to avoid turning into a human popsicle. You start with linen, soft and scratchy at the same time, worn next to your skin. It's breathable but not exactly a fashion statement. Next comes the wool, the unsung hero of medieval wardrobes. Thick, itchy and smelling faintly of sheep and sweat, wool is your shield against the cold. You layer as much wool as your family can afford. Sometimes you feel like a walking blanket fortress. Your hood is pulled up, shielding your ears from the wind that sneaks in through every crack in the wooden walls. Your gloves are a patchwork of mended fingers, as if your hands have been through some kind of textile apocalypse. The smell is another story. Wool, linen, and a faint hint of smoke mingle in the air around you. Add in a dash of dried herbs, a splash of stale sweat, and you have the unmistakable aroma of "I survived another winter." It's earthy, musky, and oddly comforting in its own way. You notice how your shoes crunch against the icy ground when you step outside, the leather stiff from the cold. Your boots have seen better days. One heel is almost completely worn through. You imagine what a modern sneaker would feel like, soft, cushioned, and possibly magical. But here, leather and fur are your best friends. Your cloak has been patched so many times it's more tapestry than garment. Each stitch tells a story of holes from thorns in the forest, encounters with unruly livestock, or the occasional misunderstanding with a neighbor's goat. You wonder if tailors ever existed back then, or if everyone was just a reluctant fashion designer. Layering clothes wasn't just about warmth, it was about survival. Historians debate whether medieval peasants wore undergarments year-round, or only in winter. Some argue that linen shirts doubled as underwear and outerwear, while others think people went without underlayers for comfort, or due to lack of resources. Either way, layering was an art and a necessity. You try to imagine walking to the market dressed in your pile of wool and linen. You'd look like a walking, mumbling marshmallow. But at least you wouldn't freeze. Your hands are particularly vulnerable. You pull on your gloves, wincing as the rough fabric scratches the backs of your fingers. You remember the time your cousin lost half a finger to frostbite. Don't worry, he's fine now, but he still grumbles about modern heaters as if they're the reason for all the world's problems. On cold mornings, your breath fogs in front of your face like tiny clouds of frustration. The fabric sometimes freezes to your beard or hair. You blink and realize your eyelashes have frost on them, glittering like tiny stars. Still, these clothes hold memories. The scent of your mother's laundry day, when she boiled herbs to freshen the wool, the rough but familiar touch of your father's old cloak, handed down because it was too sturdy to throw away. Even the occasional small tear is a reminder of life's battles against nature and livestock. You wrinkle your nose as you pull your hood tighter. No amount of wool can mask the scent of medieval life. Animal, earth, smoke and sweat, blended in a way that today's perfumes can only dream of. And, for all the discomfort, you know this armor of cloth is what keeps you alive. You smile to yourself, feeling the layered weight as a kind of medieval security blanket. Tomorrow you'll patch that hole in your sleeve and maybe, just maybe, your boots will hold out a little longer. For now, you breathe in the cold air through your layered scarf and you're ready to face another day. You sit by the fire, your stomach rumbling in a way that reminds you it's not just the cold that's harsh this time of year. Food is scarce and every bite counts. Medieval winters are famous for their brutal scarcity. Crops have long since withered or been buried beneath relentless snow. Livestock is thinning, and what's left is often too valuable to eat without careful thought. Hunger isn't just an inconvenience here, it's a constant shadow at the edge of your mind. Your family's diet right now is mostly root vegetables, turnips, carrots and parsnips, boiled into something that looks like stew but tastes like despair. You try to add a little dried herbs you found last fall, but the flavor is faint at best. Salt is a luxury, and spices are rarer than a sunny day in January. You nibble on a piece of hard bread, its texture like eating a wooden plank that's been left out in the snow. It's not delicious, it's survival. Sometimes the only meat you get is from a communal hunt, if the village is lucky. Hunting in winter is risky. Animals are scarce and elusive, and the cold makes every step a battle. There's a story your grandfather likes to tell, how his own grandfather once traded a cherished family heirloom for a single hare. That hare fed the family for a week. You think about how food and stories are tightly linked. Historians argue about how often medieval peasants actually ate meat. Some say it was a rare treat, reserved for festivals or emergencies. Others suggest small amounts were more common but poorly documented. Either way, scarcity was the rule, not the exception. Families made tough choices: eat now or save for later, risk hunting or starve. Sometimes they boiled bark or ate moss, things you'd never expect to find on a menu. Survival instincts turned weeds into cuisine and desperation into creativity. You wonder how it feels to be a child in this time, craving something sweet or fresh, knowing those tastes are dreams. Your parents don't complain aloud, but you see it in their eyes. Tired, resigned, hopeful. You recall a curious fact: in some places, people fermented vegetables to last through winter. Sauerkraut, anyone? It's acidic, tangy, and helps stave off scurvy, a problem you've heard about but never experienced firsthand. Still, the idea of eating sour cabbage for months sounds like a punishment. There's also the communal bread coven, where villagers take turns baking what little grain they've saved. The line can be long, especially when the cold keeps people indoors. Waiting your turn is a quiet kind of social event. Everyone tired, hungry, and dreaming of warm food. Despite everything, there's resilience here. People share what they can. They barter goods and services. They remind each other that spring is coming, even if it feels like a cruel joke. You finish your meager meal, the warmth from the fire a tiny comfort. You know tomorrow might be just as tough, but for now, you're full enough to close your eyes and dream. You feel the weight of the long winter not just in your bones but in your mind. It's not just cold or hunger, it's the constant presence of uncertainty, fear, and the strange hope that keeps you going. Medieval winters were brutal on mental health, even if nobody called it that back then. The days are short, the nights endless, and the cold relentless. Isolation is a silent enemy, gnawing at the edges of your thoughts. You notice how superstition thrives in the dark. Every creak in the house might be a spirit, every shadow a warning. People carry charms, bits of bone, feathers, or herbs to ward off bad luck or illness. You yourself clutch a small wooden talisman, given by your mother, saying it will protect you from frostbite and nightmares. Historians still debate how much superstition influenced daily decisions versus how much was practical survival dressed in ritual. Some believe these beliefs helped people cope with stress and uncertainty by giving them a sense of control. Fear of the unknown mixes with very real dangers, famine, disease, and the wild. You hear whispers of winter demons and ice, witches who freeze crops or steal children. It's easy to dismiss these as nonsense, but when you're staring at an empty pantry, they feel all too real. Yet despite the darkness, hope flickers like a candle in a drafty room. Hope that spring will come. Hope that the sun will warm the earth again. Hope that this story, your story, will have a better ending. You remember your grandmother's voice, calm and steady, telling you, after the coldest night, the sun rises brightest. You don't fully understand it, but you repeat it like a mantra when the cold creeps too close. The communal life helps. Shared stories, songs, and laughter, even when scarce, build a fragile bridge over the icy abyss. You lean on your family and neighbors, knowing they're struggling too, but together you're stronger. Your mind wanders to the debates among scholars about medieval resilience. Was it desperation or strength? Did people truly believe in their charms? Or was it more a social glue that held them together? Probably both. You close your eyes and let the silence wrap around you. Fear is still there, but so is something steadier, a quiet determination to see the dawn. You breathe deeply and let the sounds of the night soothe your restless thoughts. The wind outside whispers secrets. The fire crackles softly. You remind yourself, this too shall pass. At last you begin to notice a subtle change. The harsh grip of winter starts to loosen its hold, like a reluctant guest finally taking their leave. The air is less biting. There's a faint warmth in the morning sun, and the snow begins to melt in patches, revealing the frozen earth beneath. You step outside and feel the crunch of ice turning to slush underfoot. A noisy, awkward transition, but a hopeful one. The sound is almost like applause from the earth, welcoming the return of life. The animals you barely saw all winter start to emerge. Birds that had been silent return with cautious songs. The village dogs shake off their frosty coats and trot around with renewed energy, tails wagging like small flags of celebration. Farmers breathe a sigh of relief as they inspect their fields, imagining the crops that will soon be sown. The communal bread ovens fire up with more frequency, filling the air with the comforting smell of baking. You remember the long months when food was scarce and warmth was precious, and now you savor the simple joys, a steaming bowl of porridge, the feel of dry shoes instead of frozen boots, the soft murmur of rivers freed from ice. Historians still debate the exact timing and impact of the Little Ice Age's cold snaps on medieval life, but what's clear is how resilient people were. They endured and adapted, held fast by hope and community. There's a quiet joy in this slow return to life, like the world itself is waking from a deep, uncomfortable sleep. You watch as children play outside again, their laughter piercing the crisp air. It feels almost like magic. As the earth softens, so do the worries that weighed on your heart. You feel the thaw not just outside, but within yourself, a gentle reminder that no winter lasts forever. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the fresh scent of melting snow and budding life. The journey through cold and darkness is ending, replaced by light and possibility, and as you prepare to rest tonight, you carry that warmth inside, ready to face whatever comes next with quiet strength. Now, as you settle back into the comfort of your bed or haystack, feel the weight of the day gently lift away. The chill no longer bites as sharply. Your breath slows and deepens. The world outside may be vast and unpredictable, but right here in this quiet moment you are safe. Imagine a soft breeze, like the gentle whisper of spring returning after the longest, coldest winter. It moves slowly, brushing against your skin with a tender coolness that soothes and reassures. The air smells faintly of earth and new beginnings, carrying a promise that warmth and light will return in their own time. Your heartbeat eases into a calm rhythm, like a gentle lullaby sung by the night itself. The worries of cold nights, scarcity, and shadows drift away like snow melting into a quiet stream. You are held in a space where time slows and comfort reigns. Allow your thoughts to soften, your muscles relax. The stories of harsh winters and brave survival fade into the background, becoming a distant echo as you drift further into rest. Sleep is your friend now, welcoming, peaceful, and deep. Feel the embrace of warmth returning, wrapping around. You like the softest blanket. Good night, and may your dreams be as calm and steady as the slow thaw of a long winter's end.